Hello again, this is Nate Gable, and I am the Farm Business Management Instructor at Northeast Iowa Community College. And today I'm going to go through the example assignment 3.3, which is balance sheet ratios. What we're looking at here, as the previous assignments, we've looked at constructing a balance sheet, then adjusting the balance sheet, and now we're going to look at analyzing the balance sheet so that we can more fully understand the position of our farm business. As you can see at the top of this sheet, I have a completed balance sheet. It's a simplified balance sheet, obviously, but nonetheless, it still accomplishes everything that we would need in analyzing a balance sheet. And we have our current assets listed here, our non-current assets, current liabilities, non-current liabilities, assets, total liabilities, and our net worth. From here, we are going to complete 6 formulas that will tell us a little bit more about this balance sheet, about the financial condition of this farm. In your packet and in content, you saw a sheet that looks like this: balance sheet analysis formulas. It tells us a little bit about these formulas, what we want to see over here. The current ratio is current assets divided by current liabilities. This is a liquidity measure, and we want that number to be greater than 1. The larger the number, the better. In fact, we would like to see, most lending institutions would like to see at least 2 to 1 there. But anything under 1 is really a bad deal because we have more liabilities than assets. Working capital is current assets minus current liabilities. And we want this to be a big number too, because that means we have more assets relative to current liabilities. In other words, we're able to cover short-term debt. So again, working capital is current assets minus current liabilities. Debt structure is current liabilities divided by total liabilities. It tells us the percent of our debt that is due in the short term. So again, those are liquidity formulas. They tell us about the short-term ability to cover debt. Solvency is the measure of the ability of all assets to cover all debts. It's overall ability to cover debt, total assets and total liabilities of the farm. The debt to asset ratio tells us basically, these are all variations of each other, these 3 ratios, but debt to asset ratio, it tells you in its name how to compute that ratio. Debt to asset, total debt or liability to total asset. A farm that has no debt would have a debt to asset ratio of 0. Most farms are going to be somewhere between 0 and 0.5, meaning there's about $2 of asset per dollar of debt. But we want to see a smaller number here tells us we have less risk on this farming operation. We absolutely do not want to see a debt to asset ratio of greater than 1. That tells us that we have more liabilities than asset. That farm would be in major trouble. Most banks, lending institutions want to see a farm under 0.5. But again, the lower the number, the less risk, the better, more financially healthy that farm is. Debt to equity ratio, this is total liabilities to net worth. So it's similar to debt to asset ratio. Total liabilities to net worth. Again, dollars of debt versus dollars of equity. It tells us how much does our creditors own relative to how much we own. If we had a debt to asset ratio up here of 0.5, that would mean our debt to equity ratio would be 1 to 1. $1 of debt for every dollar of equity. If we sold our entire farm, the bank would get $1, we would get $1. For every dollar the bank would get, we would get $1. So you can see it's a variation of the debt to asset ratio. Equity to asset ratio, again, another variation of the same thing. Where the debt to asset ratio told us what percent of the total assets are covered in debt, the equity to asset ratio tells us what percent of total assets are owned by us, do we have ownership in. So if we had a debt to asset ratio here of 0.2, our equity to asset ratio would be 0.8. The creditors own 20% of this farm, we own 80%. These two numbers will add up to 1.0 always. This tells us what percent the bank owns, this tells us what percent we own. Pretty simple. So let's go back to our assignment then. We have this balance sheet here, Big Time Farms. We have a total asset of $1,494,382, total liability of $687,963, gives us a net worth of $806,419. Sounds good. Let's see more. Current ratio. Again, I have it listed right here, the ratios. It's current assets divided by current liabilities. So we took the current asset, $241,606, divided by current liability, $167,066. Gives us a current ratio of 1.45. Good, not great. It's over 1, that's good. We'd like to see a little higher. We'd like to see $2 of current assets for every dollar of current liability, but still not bad, 1.45. Working capital, current assets minus current liabilities. In other words, how much of this owner, how much of his or her own money is at work right now invested in current assets. So again, we take the current asset minus current liability. In this case, we have $74,540. Debt structure. How much other total liabilities is due this year? Total liabilities divided. Current liabilities divided by total liabilities. So the 167,066 of current liability divided by total liability of 687,963. So it's about 20.24. So this number can be kind of deceiving. It doesn't tell us a whole lot. It does tell us what percent of the total debt is due this year. If this was a big number, that would mean that we're getting close to getting everything paid off because everything's going to be paid back this year. If we had a lot of debt due after this year, this one would be a smaller number. Be careful. A lot of people make the mistake of taking current liability divided by non-current liability. That's not what we're doing. It's current liability divided by total liability. Always make sure that you do that correctly. Let's go on to the solvency ratios then. They're pretty simple to remember because what you do is listed right in their name. The debt to asset ratio, for example, debt, total liabilities divided by total assets, debt to asset. So this farm, $687,000 of total debt divided by total asset, $1,494,382. You make that computation, ends up being 0.46. So 46% of the total assets of this farm are covered in debt. Just a quick jump down here to equity to asset. Like I said earlier, this is 46%. That means this one's going to be 54%. Why? That adds up to 1. Equity to asset ratio, the equity or net worth to total asset. Take the net worth, divide that by total assets. It tells you what percent of the farm business is owned by the operator. 46% owned by the creditors, 54% owned by the operator. Debt to equity ratio, again, it says right in the name what to do here. Debt, total liability, divided by total equity or net worth. And we come out here 0.853. So at least there's less debt than net worth. That's a good thing. that number you want to see less than 1, and this farm is at less than 1.0. So anyway, so we just covered those 6 computations or ratios or um, computations that explain or help us analyze the balance sheet or net worth statement. And there again, this helps us compare balance sheets. A balance sheet that may have a net worth of $10 million, that sounds great up front, but maybe they have $9.5 million of debt. Well, if that's the case, they really don't have, if they have a $10 million, I said net worth earlier, but I meant if we have $10 million of assets but $9.5 million of liability, that would have a lower net worth than this smaller farm. Okay, and it would be more highly leveraged. Leverage meaning more debt relative to total assets. So that's why we use these ratios. We use them to compare farms on an even basis, even though a lot of farms are different sizes and different amount of assets, debt, etc. So anyway, hope this all was helpful to you. Hopefully it made sense. And as always, if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to give me a call, drop me an email, or stop by my office, and I will do my best to help you out any way I can. So thanks a lot, and have a great day.